Welcome, my name is Susan Scherf. I'm an educator with the Institute of American Indian Studies. You're here to view this video hopefully because it's Connecticut Trails Weekend, which is the weekend of June 6th and 7th. Unfortunately, we won't be holding the event, but hopefully you will watch this video and go on a hike on your own and learn about these things. Today, I'd like to focus on resources of the woods. Again, 10,000 years ago, pretty much the same resources existed then that do today. So what you need to survive, you take a tree, you turn it into all sorts of things. Think how many uses one single tree has both for human existence and animals. We did a survey with friends and family and other educators that one single tree can have over 54 different uses, and that will be posted at the end of this video. So here we have the mighty white oak. You can see that someone's already busy working on it. These horizontal lines are the lines from the yellow-bellied sapsucker. If you're a woodworker, you'd want to use oak. It's a hardwood. If you were a Native American, you would have eaten the acorns. You would have had to have ground them into a powder and then leached out the tannins in them. Leaching takes those tannins out so they're not so bitter and they're more palatable. Again, the Native Americans would have used the inner bark for an antiseptic, and of course the wood for a building material. So our forests today look primarily a lot different than they did 400 years ago. Again, 450 years ago or so, they wouldn't have been as deforested as they are now. So old growth trees are hard to see when you're going for a hike in the woods here in New England, but this guy is definitely getting up there. It's probably in the 70 to 80 years old. An old growth would be a 400-year-old tree. Most of those trees were cut down by the colonists and used as resources for both ships, housing, woods, furniture, etc. So this is a big white pine. White pine would have been eaten by Native Americans. Unfortunately, in times of starvation, they would have eaten the inner bark called the cambium layer. Not horrible, but a little turpentine tasting. Native Americans would have chewed on the sap, and they could have used the pitch, which is that sticky pine pitch, for caulking both the dugout canoe, the birch bark canoe, any maybe gourd vessel they would have created. So again, think about each thing as a resource. This guy is a great nesting place. We've got some type of bird of prey nest way up in the canopy layer. So again, this tree is a resource for all sorts of different animals. These big, huge holes are probably made from the pileated woodpecker, our largest North American woodpecker. He's going to make deep enough cavities where you could get flying squirrels, chickadees, screech owls, saw-whet owls will then inhabit those holes, red squirrels, chipmunks, etc. And then of course it's got the great debris. This is all going to be from the carpenter ants excavating this tree. So again, a dead tree is still a resource for different animals. So we've got two different types of trees. We have your deciduous, which is your leaf-bearing tree, and then you have your conifer or needle-bearing. Some trees like the tamarack are what are called selectively deciduous. Your conifer typically has a little cone. This guy doesn't have a cone yet because it hasn't started that season, the seed season, but this is your eastern hemlock. The eastern hemlock would have been used for probably shelter building by the Native Americans. It also has a chemical in it. It's really good for starting fires, but it's an evergreen. It's going to hold its needles throughout the year. That's why it's called an evergreen, because it stays green. They figured out in the 1800s, about 1820, when they were tanning hides, originally it was the urine and the brain of the hides and then smoking the hides that tanned the hide. They figured out they could use the eastern hemlock. So a lot of New England was deforested of their eastern hemlock. They would cut the tree down, peel the bark off, and they'd have giant vats of bark and hides, boiling up the hides, and the tannic acid would tan the hides. Okay, this is the American beech tree. Unfortunately, we're losing our American beech to the American beech blight. An insect goes in and then it gets a fungus and dies off. The beech trees were critical because they produce actually a very small nut that our deer and our turkey eat now. Native Americans could have eaten the nut as well. These guys will hold on to their leaves a lot longer than some of the other trees, so when you're going on a fall walk, you may still see the brown curled up leaves in the fall, but that's the American beech. It's starting to get the blight. It gets like little puffy cankers on it. And you can see it's all bubbling and blistering. That's the fungus that's getting into this American beech and eventually will kill this tree. It should be just a nice smooth bark. It shouldn't have this bubbling. But that's the demise of the American beech. So again, woodland resources are essential both today and thousands of years ago. This is sphagnum moss. It's an ancient moss, probably millions of years old. It's changed its form and shape a little bit, but this moss would have been used by Native Americans during menstruation, also in diapers if there was a wound. It was also a way to transport water. It can hold 10 times its weight in water. This little plant right here is a type of wintergreen. We have two different types here in New England. I'll try to find the other one. Again, the berries would have been eaten. You can chew on the leaves. Wintergreen does hold a little bit of aspirin in it, so it's a naturally occurring aspirin. Okay, this is mullein. You'll see it a lot on highways. It grows in disturbed areas, so when you're going on your hike, you're gonna see this plant. It sends up a really long stalk, could be 6 feet high, with beautiful yellow flowers on it. Again, mullein was a great resource for Native Americans. It could have been used as their toilet paper, so we really need it now during the pandemic. It also could have gone in their shoes to soften and line their shoes. So this is mullein. Another plant you'll see that grows in disturbed areas, this is plantain. Plantain has some anticoagulant principles to it. They also call this colonist footprint because again, it grows in disturbed areas. It's not native to this area. So this is the witch hazel tree. Witch hazel would have been used as an astringent and still is today. So an astringent is something that cleans and disinfects. And here is your witch hazel. So when you're going on a hike, you'll see these beautiful flower buds in the witch hazel. Again, this tree is already being affected by different insects. This is probably a midge. A midge will sting the midge, or wasp can sting the leaf. The leaf then creates a canker and then the larva will be in here. Here's some more stings and you can see. So you typically never find a perfect leaf because it's going to be being used by one animal or another out in the woods. This is the hickory or butternut. That would have been a really important protein resource for the Native Americans. They would have eaten the hickory nut, smashed it in their mortar and pestle. Again, a very good source of fat and protein. But again, collecting those would have taken a lot of work. Hickory, most importantly, used for Native Americans was the bark. You could harvest the bark. This isn't quite the bark season, but you would have harvested it, pulled the bark off into long strips, and it would have been their cordage. I started this one yesterday, so it's dried out a little bit. But this becomes cordage to use for making their structures. But this is from the hickory. So again, Native Americans utilized every part of an environment. They transformed all sorts of different things. For example, we use gourds just as decorations, but Native Americans would have turned this into a bowl. They would have turned the gourd into a ladle to scoop. It could have been a storage vessel. And then of course this one is a birdhouse. So every part, every aspect of the environment was used for their survival. And when you go for a walk in the woods, think about how many different uses the trees would have or the plants would have in both medicine, structures, and all those different things. So I hope you enjoyed this little piece from the IAIS educators, and happy trails.